In part 4, I'll cover a few animation tips that I learned from working on a past studio project. First, I'll explain the basic navigation tools and settings during animation. Then, I'll demonstrate additional techniques during scene transitions, such as highlighting areas through color change. And lastly but not least, I'll demonstrate how to create construction sequence animation. So, let's say you're creating a video production as a team, and you want to navigate viewers through the areas of change your team has implemented. Instead of recording while using your cursor to move around, SketchUp has built-in animation feature which allows you to set scenes, and it will eventually run the scene transitions for you. First, I'll go ahead and set a beginning scene. Now, I want this commercial plaza to be my first close-up scene. You can rename your scenes here. You can also rename them here. Let's add another area for a close-up view. Okay, now what you can do is to play the animation. You may notice that the scenes are transitioning too fast, and you would like slower transition and some pauses in between. So you'll go under Settings, and we'll adjust the scene transition time interval to every 3 seconds. And let's give it a 2-second scene delay. Now let's try playing again. Also, if you want to readjust the view of the scene, make sure that once you adjust it, to update it. You can also adjust the order of the scenes. For example, if I want to explain this plaza area first in the video. That's basically how you navigate through scenes. If you're in Architecture Studio, I suggest watching this tutorial that I link here on the top right. It shows you how to transition scenes smoothly without going through walls with the adjustments of depth of field. When you want to export the animation, go to File, Export, Animation, and depending on how much you're animating and your file size, it could take a long time. I'm going to fast forward the process here. And here's the exported file that you can then bring into a video editing software for video production. In the next 2 cases, I'll explain how to apply this animation feature more creatively. Now, as we know the basics that SketchUp animation features, we can use that and apply it to different scenarios. In this scenario, I'm going to demonstrate color transition when the scene shifts from one to another to create highlighting effect. The model on the right is the pre-highlighted model, and the model on the left includes all the highlighting areas that the animation will eventually show. As the scene transitions, the colors, the trees, and the people will appear. I'm going to hide the left model for now. So the first thing you might think of is to save the scene without colors. then apply colors and save the next scene. However, if you try playing it, you'll discover that every scene includes what you just colored. Therefore, what you need to do instead is to hide or unhide grouped objects. Here, I have the amphitheater area grouped and in its separate layer, so all I have to do is to turn on the layer and update the scene. Now try playing again. I also want to mention that for the animation settings, I set the scene delay to 0 because you don't want any scene delay between scene 2 and scene 3. You need that scene 2 with no colors because if you don't, as soon as the scene starts transitioning, the colors and trees would appear before you even get there. So that's why every scene you transition, you're creating both the grayscale and the colored scenes, and there should be no scene delay. Let's turn the proposed model back on. In order to hide your grouped area and align it to your model, what I did was that I already grouped all these components as one object. Now, I just have to make a copy and align the edges. You may need to turn your edge lines on to help facilitate that. As you notice, I want the buildings to change colors too, but I can't apply colors. So I grouped the buildings with my other components and painted dark gray. What you then want to do is to make sure that all the buildings in white are grouped and layered so that you can hide them. And be sure to also place what you just copied under the right layer. Now I'm going to turn the lines off and create a scene with the grayscale. Then create another scene by turning the white buildings off and turn the colored block on. Now try playing again. As you play it, you'll notice something. The affordable housing area that's supposed to be highlighted after the amphitheater is already showing up. You can hide it and update your scene, but once you get to the next one, for example, you can't hide it because it's not in your view, and you can't move your view and update it as that messes up your view. So the counterintuitive way to address this is to reverse your workflow and start with all colors, then transition your colors to grayscale as you work your way backwards. So I'm going to start by setting my final view. And I'm going to delete all these scenes. Call this final. Then, instead of doing the amphitheater first, we'll instead do the affordable housing area. Save the colored one. Then switch to grayscale and add another scene. Now let's transition to the amphitheater, and we'll do the same thing from color to grayscale. then your initial view. Once completed, I'm going to reverse the orders of the scenes. Now let's try playing it. You might want to add another ending scene so that there's a scene delay before the video ends, creating a smoother production. I just gave an example with 2 areas. Eventually, you might have 10 areas you're trying to highlight. So you want to make sure that you name your scenes in an organized manner so that you don't lose track of where you are when you start reversing the scenes. This is a clip of the animation that was used for our video production, with rendering images explaining each of the highlighted areas. Also, it will look much nicer when you animate with shadows. You would have to turn the shadows on and update the scenes. It will instantly slow down my computer, which is why I didn't demonstrate them with the shadows. Now, let's say that your team has completed the design intervention and wants to show phasing in animation for a video production. I'll be demonstrating how to achieve that, as well as animating the construction process, something that might be fun for the audience to look at. First, we're going to do a quick practice with a few cubes right here. And on top of these cubes, we need to bring up section. That's the only thing we would need for this tutorial. And make sure that each cube is grouped on its own. It's critical that every component you're animating is grouped. Now, we're going to double click the first cube to edit group and click on section plane. And we're going to hover it to the bottom of the cube. Then hit your top arrow key to orient your plane along the z-axis. Then click once. Now, you see the color of the plane turns orange. If you double click on it, the cube appears and the plane color turns gray. If you double click again, it turns back to orange. That's how you identify if your object is hidden or not. We're going to leave this one unhidden. For the second cube, we'll do the exact same thing, but instead, we'll hide it. For the last cube, we're going to orient the plane along the y-axis by hitting your right arrow key and keep it hidden. Now, let's create scenes. Make sure that you hide the section planes when you create each scene. Let's save this as our first scene. Now I'm going to click in and double click on the section plane to hide the cube, and save this as your second scene. With our third scene, I'm going to bring this up, for the next scene, hide it. Scene 5, bring this one up. And scene 6, hide it back. Now let's try playing it. This knowledge is needed for animating our site model. We're going to use this mixed-use plaza area as our example and call this one of the phases. Then, the animation features show the construction process. The process is broken up into 4 segments. The first one, bulldozing the old structures. Second one, creating new structures. Third, generating the pavement. And at last, planting the trees. We'll be applying what we just learned from the cube exercise on the construction sequence. Here, I created layers. It's important to keep your groups organized by layering them. For the original structures, I copied from the pre-developed model and pasted them into the new model. I'll turn this layer off because we don't need it for this demonstration. Then, I'm going to turn off these other layers and leave just the old structures on. Make sure that each of these components are grouped. Now, double-click to Edit Group, find your section plane, and make sure that you place it on the blue plane. And we don't want to hide this one yet, so double-click the plane so that the structures appear. Let's turn this layer off for now, and let's turn on New Buildings. Again, double-click to Edit Group, and place your plane on the ground surface using the top arrow key. For this one, we're going to keep the structures hidden. Next, the pavement. For this one, we'll set the section plane on its side using your right arrow key to place it on the red plane. Now, you'll have to place it on the other end instead of the end closer to you because that's where the section cut arrows are pointing towards. And you want the pointed direction to be void so that it's hidden. If you want to reverse the section cut direction, you would have to rotate your view so that the section arrows reverse. The difference that it'll make is the direction to which the pavement will roll out. If you set it on the edge and you still see some line segment, just hover your plane a little further. Let's set it at the street median instead. And keep the pavement hidden. Lastly, we'll turn the trees on and proceed through the same steps. Now that we have all the section planes created for each component, we're going to start creating scenes. First, set a perspective view that you like, and this will be the same angle of view for the upcoming scenes that we create. And let's turn on the old buildings. This will be set as our initial scene, and again, make sure you hide the section planes before adding the scene. For the next scene, we'll hide the buildings. For the third scene, we'll bring up the new buildings. You might have to make a couple attempts to find the right one. For the fourth scene, that will be the pavement, which is the plane that's sitting vertically. The fifth scene will be trees, and remember that planes in orange indicate that the objects are hidden. Lastly, I'll add the same scene as our last scene so that the animation doesn't end abruptly. Also, I want to point out that if you realize that you need to edit something, such as readjusting your plane, you'll have to delete all your scenes and recreate them. So, you want to be cautious as you create your section planes and scenes so as to not expend extra time making changes and recreating them. Now check your settings. I set the scene transition to every 4 seconds with 1 second scene delay. And let's try playing it. When it's being played in SketchUp, sometimes the scenes don't transition as clearly as you would like. So instead, I'll export the animation, then see how it plays out. This could take a while, especially if you saved the scenes with the shadows turned on. In this case, I'll keep the shadows off since it's just a demonstration. For the animation straight from SketchUp, you'll discover that the speed and timing are oftentimes off, and to adjust that, you would have to use an editing software and adjust the speed and duration of the clips. I personally use Movavi. It is like the Windows version of iMovie. You can also use Adobe Premiere, Camtasia Studio. These are popular choices too.